Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of the Audible Waters podcast. I am your host, Ralph Jesperson. Today I am starting a new series regarding what I would call epic, possibly prophetic dreams I have had that have not come to pass at the time of this recording. I just finished a series of 3 videos where I went over the last 3 big traumatic events that have emerged in the world since 2008. I did those to put up evidence that I have some kind of track record of accuracy, which is something that is very much ignored in the part of Jesus' church I have grown up in. Here are links to those 3 as I encourage anyone watching this news series to first look at these to see if I am trustworthy or not. I am well aware that most of the videos you will find like this on YouTube are fake BS. There are so many and they drown out whatever is here that is real. And a quick tip here. God often speaks in riddles that require time and wisdom to interpret. The false prophets always tell you what you want to hear and rarely, if ever, use riddles with symbols. The following dream was finalized in this exact form for you to listen to or read or both back on September 17th, 2017. I had it some time before that, so here it is in a voice better than my own.
I dreamed that I was helping out my pastor by using my old red truck to help him tow something. I hitched up his load behind my truck and got into the driver's seat. I was driving at the beginning of the dream, but then things switched suddenly. I found him driving for the rest of the dream, whereas I was now an open-air passenger in what was being towed, which was something like a small open trailer. Behind that, a small vacation camper trailer then appeared, being towed behind what I was now sitting in. I recognized it as being mine, even though I have never actually owned such a thing. Soon after the time of the switch, the pastor started driving fast and making what first appeared to be poor driving decisions. At one point in time, he slowed down to drive underneath this metal structure or vehicle that looked too low and narrow for my truck to clear. It passed through all right, but it had now turned into a car. The car was intact, but it had horizontal scars on it running the full length of the vehicle, where the paint was scraped off on the sides and top, and the rear view mirrors were now broken off. After this is when the pastor started speeding and driving like a madman. I initially did not see why he was doing this, as I was paying more attention to the vehicle and the man driving it than to the environment surrounding it, which had changed drastically in a short period of time. Everything went from being calm to turning into the ultimate destructive storm. When I finally took a moment to stop paying attention to the pastor and my car he was now driving, I took a quick glance behind me at the scenery. What I saw was terrifying. Massive storm clouds had appeared and a tangled web of tornadoes were now forming in the air and were making their way to the ground. They actually looked more like dreadlocks tangled together and spinning clockwise. They were twisted together like a rope that was revolving, with the whole thing spinning from the ground up into where they disappeared into the storm clouds. They reached out like tentacles that snatched up everything that they touched. They were bundled together in groups of 10 to 30, or so individual narrow tornadoes that when combined the largest of these had the power of an F5 tornado. An F5 will obliterate everything in their path, including the sturdiest high rises, and can throw something as heavy as a car a mile. There were many of these chasing us, and they stretched out behind me as far as I could see from the north to the south. They twisted in their course and did not run in straight lines on the ground. Everything they touched disappeared up into the sky. I saw dirt, cars, people, trees, and even whole buildings pulled from their foundations and sucked up. I even saw intact high-rise buildings being shaken and removed from the ground whole and sucked up by the bunches of dreadlock tornadoes. I recognized 2 of these because of signs on them. One was a bank building 20 to 30 stories tall, snatched from the ground whole and sucked up into the sky in one piece, never to be seen again. The other was a much shorter building housing a non-profit community institution, the type that gives out excellence awards for human achievements and scholarships to college. It had a sign on it celebrating the nth anniversary of its original formation. The building, along with the sign and all its contents, was sucked up in one piece, and the whole thing ceased to exist in mere seconds. There were many other large buildings plucked up whole as well, but these 2 stood out because I could see the signs on them. When I first noticed these dreadlock tornadoes, my thoughts towards my pastor's driving went from one extreme to the other. Instead of questioning his driving as being too fast, now I was concerned that he might not be driving fast enough. At first, I noticed only the destruction at a distance, but the clouds overhead were churning too. We were driving through a mixed area with a major city with high-rises on my left and rural areas and farms on my right, as I looked out in the opposite direction that we were headed in. The road was not straight, and was constantly curving to the right and back to the left. A bunch of dreadlocks formed over our heads and reached out towards the ground. I thought the end was near for us, but their tentacles curved overhead and hit the area we had just driven through moments before. They destroyed everything as they chased us. Just when it looked like we were going to be hit too, the road veered back to the right and this tornado went in the opposite direction. We had a close encounter with death but had survived. I then noticed that we had somehow lost my travel trailer that we were towing behind me. I suppose that was a good thing, as it was extra weight that we did not need, and it must have made driving more challenging for the pastor. It was then that I started to notice what was being hit and destroyed. This included the high-rise buildings I already mentioned and other structures. 2 other instances stood out that I can remember. One was of a woman I saw running behind us on my left side. She was running away on the street from one bunch of tornadoes that was headed straight towards her. She acted insane, for she ran up to a tall building that had a swing dangling down that was secured to a pole sunk into the side of the building. She sat down on it, and I could tell that she closed her eyes and started to sing to herself as she swung on it. She believed that she would be all right because the building was old and its foundations were secure, even though she had not taken shelter inside but instead was swinging away in her own delusional fantasy. Very soon this monstrous octopus caught up to her, and like the other buildings I had seen, it grabbed the building by its roots and sucked the whole thing with the lady on the swing up into the air, and they were suddenly gone. Later, we were driving through a more rural scene and I saw large explosions miles off on my left side. I recognized that there was an oil refinery being hit, and the storage tanks were blowing up as they got hit one by one. There was now a man who had appeared in this trailer, and was sitting to my right. He had arrived, I guess, shortly before our close encounter with death. I was pointing things out to him, like the bank building, the non-profit, and the woman on the swing attached to an institution that was an idol to her, because she trusted in the human institution instead of God himself. I remember pointing out the explosions at the distant refinery to him too. After that, I remember saying to him that the scene we were seeing, while it was horrifying, was also a little deceptive. The multiple storm systems destroyed a lot, but I pointed out to this man that if you look closely you will see that there are areas between them that were untouched. People could have survived in these areas. The paths of the storms appeared random as each group of tornadoes veered up and down, yet they did not hit everything. There were areas where whole buildings might have been untouched and be undamaged. In others there would be varying degrees of damage from debris, but people who had heeded the warning sirens and taken shelter would have at least survived to rebuild. Soon after pointing this out, I saw the storms begin to die down and the cyclones lift back up into the sky where they had come out of. We were now driving out in the open country with the ruins of the smoking city behind us. We were on higher ground looking down, and saw the smoke rising from the ruins, but the storm had passed. I breathed a deep sigh of relief and told my companion that it was over now and it was behind us. By the grace of God and with the driving of the pastor, we had survived. Since the time I first saw the weird-looking tornadoes form, I had been lucid dreaming. I recognized this was a dream and God was showing me the future coming at us all quickly. I told the man about the many other times I had seen similar dreams, but the revelations had been cut short because I had allowed fear to overtake me. I would wake up in the middle of the dream because the fear from seeing multiple tornadoes startled me awake. After more than a dozen similar dreams, I had just now finally conditioned myself to stay calm and alert and pay attention to what was happening, and so allow God to communicate fully to me whatever He wanted to, without my fear cutting it short. I told the man sitting next to me that I had finally learned this lesson, and this is why I was able to see the whole thing. I was at peace and my attention turned to remembering every little detail I had seen, wanting to write it all down. I had seen specific signs with names on them, and wanted to remember them. I wanted to get every detail accurate, and so I realized that I must now wake up in order to still have everything fresh in my mind. And so I peacefully woke up right away, looked at my clock to see what time it was and got out of bed. Regardless of what it said, I was going to go to the computer and start writing everything down. I was relieved to see that it was about my normal time of getting up, so I would not lose any sleep in doing so. And so I have written down all of the major things that stood out from the dream. I do not have a photographic memory, so I cannot remember every specific detail, like the names on the signs. But to the best of my ability to remember, I have written all that I do still remember. Now for my personal opinion of what this dream means many years later. Vehicles in my dreams always are about my life and where I am at now, and where I am headed in the future. I started this life in control of my own life, thinking too much about my ability to serve God while I was in control, but it spiraled out of control. My old pastor I know represents God taking over control of my life. I am no longer steering, but He is, and I'd become the passenger to see where He takes me. As I was finishing up college, I was the most optimistic about the future in this life I ever was. Then life happened and the hard knocks taught me important lessons. The camper being towed behind my vehicle represented that naivety that life was a vacation, but that was soon lost in the real chaos. The truck that turns into a car in the midst of a crisis makes me think of my old truck that I had a long time that broke down and had to be left, and was replaced by a car. In the dream, the car had scars on it from the crisis, which I think represents the real crises I have had in my life that have left scars. The mirrors were broken off because following Jesus means not looking back, for Jesus replied, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God." Yet through them I matured in my ability to see truth and trust God. Good comes out of my scars just as good came out of Jesus' scars. The storm clouds represent, I think, the 2020s and the strange tornadoes, the world problems which started and we are still in the middle of. We all saw things we had never seen before in the first 2 years of the pandemic as things got hectic and very confusing. Some things got destroyed as some died, and some businesses went bankrupt, and other things changed radically and permanently. Some people can identify with a life that seemed to speed up overall, and has yet to slow down again. But I think the rest of what I saw, and indeed the most severe things, have not happened yet, but are coming. I think a close encounter with danger and death is coming for me, one that will, at the last minute, be dodged. Nothing like that has happened to me so far. This is not the only dream I had where I saw a tornado heading at me change course at the last second. Also, I saw a bank, a non-profit charity, and then an energy producer get demolished. I think a time is coming when these 3 industries will be hit very hard and there will be many that simply go out of business. They got shaken up to some extent already, but I suspect that we will see them devastated in the future. And then there is coming a time when all of this is over and I am looking at the destruction in the past behind me. This is the hope that I will survive these times that are coming. But things will get a whole lot crazier first, and there will be a lot of destruction and death, not just in these 3 industries but also others that they will affect. Some of the dead will be people who are living in their own fantasy world, and so are unprepared and will not even look to run from the danger and into safety. This is not a time to be Pollyanna optimistic. She died as a very old building was destroyed, which I interpret that some very old businesses that we all know by name will be gone by the end of this time of judgment that we are in. It will likely destroy some of the institutions that we have made idols out of by trusting more in those human institutions than we do in God. This dream ended with me telling this man who appeared out of nowhere that the destruction was not absolute. What is coming is not the end-time final apocalypse that some fear. It will be very bad, but not quite that bad, and some people and things will survive by the grace of God. I would not share this if I were not certain that much worse times than the pandemic are still coming and relatively soon. Only a few weeks ago I had a new dream where I saw these strange tornadoes again, which is only the second time now I saw those odd things. In this dream, I was in a hotel with a group of people up on about the 18th floor or so. We all walked out onto a large balcony on the corner of the building. When we went through that door, I saw the tornadoes again, all over that city doing great damage. We walked quickly around the edge of that balcony where we could see where they were at. As we got to the other edge, someone pointed out a big single tornado was dangerously close to us, and we needed to get off of that balcony, now. So we ran back towards the door we had just come through. I take that as a warning that another wave of bad times is very close to us now. It was not one of the multi-braided tornadoes, so I think we are going to soon see a wave of destruction that will come and go, but another bigger and worse will follow it. I will not be surprised if the entire 20th decade we are in the middle of will be very difficult. I have no doubt why we are in a prolonged time of judgment. All I can say is read the Old Testament prophet books. You will read about God being angry at His own people for their many sins, with specifically idolatry and immorality often mentioned throughout. We are living in a time when people are very openly immoral, and those claiming to be Christians are not any better, though their hypocrisy is much higher. And we have made idols out of other people, our celebrities, and put more trust in them and pay more attention to them than we do our own supposed King Jesus. We have made not a few of them bigger than Jesus. They have a bigger audience, bigger crowds, and the hours spent listening to them in total is greater than all of the hours combined that people listened to Jesus so long ago. This is an enormous responsibility, and I am not sure anyone in this place is handling that responsibility well. I expect things to go very badly for our celebrities, for God is jealous for our attention and devotion. These bozos that we praise are no substitute for knowing Jesus and hearing His voice directly and not through our idols. Time to replace the endless book buying, conference attending, and endless consumption of their media online with prayer and devoted, in context, personal Bible study. This is what repentance away from Christian idolatry looks like. And replace the idolatry of voting with the prayers in our scriptures for our government. Jesus is our King, not the U.S. President, Congress, and court system. And next time, if I am not distracted, I will share another dream about destruction. I lost count how many I have had since 2008.